It's 1 year since the blockade of Qatar began. 4 Arab neighbors cut ties and imposed a land, sea and air embargo. The aim to bring Doha to its knees. Have they succeeded, and is a settlement possible? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. A year ago, 4 countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain and Egypt, severed their ties with Qatar and imposed a full blockade. It came after Qatar state news agency was hacked and fake news posted on it. Al Jazeera's own investigation has found the group behind the hacking worked from a Saudi government ministry in Riyadh, and its phones and computers were connected to the Saudi communications company. In a separate development, Saudi Arabia is threatening military action against Qatar if it acquires Russian weapons. Those reports in 2 of the biggest newspapers in France, Le Figaro and Le Monde. They say the Saudi Crown Prince has written to the presidents of France and the United States of America and the UK's Prime Minister, warning he is ready to retaliate if Qatar acquires the S-400 anti-aircraft defense systems. But the threat of military action against Doha is not new. The blockading countries were reportedly planning it at the beginning of the crisis 1 year ago. As we mentioned, the crisis began to unfold when Qatar news agency was hacked. On the 23rd of May, 4 statements attributed to the Emir of Qatar were posted on the agency's website and broadcast by Saudi and Emirati media. The hacking came 3 days after US President Donald Trump met Arab leaders in Saudi Arabia and addressed the Riyadh summit. On June the 4th, hacked email accounts of the UAE's ambassador to the United States, Yusuf Al-Utaiba, revealed his involvement in long-running campaign to undermine Qatar. The next day, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain and Egypt cut ties with Qatar and imposed a land, sea and air blockade. They accused Doha of supporting terrorism, which Qatar denies. The 4 countries then placed 59 individuals and 12 organizations from Qatar on what it calls terror list. The group then sent Qatar a list of 13 demands, including shutting down Al Jazeera media network, curbing relations with Iran, and closing a Turkish military base it hosts. A year on, there's still no end to the crisis. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us in the studio, Abdel Al-Horr, Director of the Diplomatic Institute at the Qatari Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From Kuwait, Abdullah Shaji, Professor of Political Science at the Kuwait University, has just written a book on the GCC crisis, root cause and the future of the GCC alliance. Also in Doha, Sultan Barakat, Director of the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies at the Doha Institute. Thank you to you all. Abdel Aziz, 1 year after the crisis, has Qatar managed to weather the blockade?
Actually, it has managed, and it has managed successfully in terms of economy, politics, media. From all domains, I think Qatar has managed to manage this huge crisis. Not only this, even politically speaking, now Qatar is not talking about its own security. It's talking about the region security. Therefore, His Highness the Emir in the Munich conference has proposed the idea of signing a regional security agreement, an umbrella that will protect or assure the security and safety of all countries in the region. Assure that each country, no matter the size of this country, can practice their sovereignty and independence.
Abdullah, if you remember, a year ago we were talking about the crisis triggering one of the most difficult moments for the region. It seems like the whole region was in uncharted territory. Are we still within that uncharted territory?
Unfortunately, yes, there is no inkling that this senseless crisis, in my opinion, shouldn't have taken place to start with. It's still just, as we call, the new normal now. And this is the most devastating part of this crisis, that it has dealt a major blow for the GCC alliance. It has dealt a major blow to the achievements. We used to have a few years back when King Abdel of Saudi Arabia in 2011 suggested moving from cooperation to Gulf Union, and everybody was on awe about that. And we used to have grandiose plans and mighty schemes that the GCC finally was going to be leading the Arab world, where other major powers in the Arab world have been in shambles because of the crisis that they were going through, associated with what was called the Arab Spring. And now we are just hoping and wishing and praying that we go back with our dwarfing our mighty expectations to just going back to the way we were pre-June 5th, 2017, the watershed event that is still reeling from, we are all reeling from, is still taking its toll on us. It has really ripped off our achievements, whether it's economic, whether it's solidarity, whether it's cooperation, and also casted a major shadow of doubt on the United States as a guarantor of this region. Why the Qataris have to rely on few hundreds of Turkish soldiers to safeguard its territories and sovereignty and well-being, while Qatar has 11,000 U.S. soldiers in the largest air base for the United States outside the United States? What are they doing there?
We'll talk in detail later in the show about the role of the United States of America in this crisis. Sultan, there's always been talk about a political way out of this crisis. But then when you hear the reports from the French newspapers, Le Figaro and Le Monde, about Saudi Arabia threatening military action against Qatar if it acquires the S-400 weapons from Russia, is that an indication that we could see even further worse happening in the future?
I think the likelihood is that there will be more escalation of threats, particularly if Qatar does acquire those anti-aircraft missiles. However, I think in the interest of everyone in the region, it is time to turn again to a diplomatic process and really exert much greater effort in trying to bring an end to this blockade.
Abdel Aziz, Qatar says that it has managed to contain the crisis, but are the costs manageable in a way or another? Because, you know, the Qataris then have to tap into their wealth funds to be able to compensate for the damages created by the blockade. Is this something that Qatar can sustain in the near future?
Actually, everybody is losing in this meaningless fight or struggle of power. We lose, they lose. We lose dollars, they lose dollars. Minister of Finance of Qatar has said. We bleed, they bleed. Yes, this blockade has caused a huge financial impact, not only on Qatar and on the blockading country. We are a resource hub in the whole region, the most stable, used to be the most stable region in the whole area over there. But Qatar managed throughout the year to really make sure that its economy and its situation is really strong. One indicator or one strong indicator, when Qatar issued the bond and asked for $8 billion US, they attracted $50 billion US. It shows that not only Qatar has managed to really instill the trust in its economy, even the whole world is trusting the economy of Qatar.
US President Donald Trump initially backed Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt and Bahrain and the group's blockade against Qatar, but he since called for all sides to resolve the dispute. Media leaks reveal how lobbying has played a role in influencing Trump. Here's Patty Culhane in Washington.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism.
It was a shock in Washington and across the globe. A U.S. president publicly going after Qatar, a close ally that houses the biggest U.S. base in the Middle East, siding with the blockading countries. At the time, many believed the Saudis' fawning treatment of him in Riyadh played a part. But we now know, thanks to emails leaked to the Associated Press, that the push to get the president to side with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates began months before. The emails are from Elliot Brody, a big-time Republican fundraiser. According to the AP, he was working with George Nader, who said he was close to both of the crown princes from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Brody reportedly lobbied the president and later received hundreds of millions of dollars worth of defense deals from the UAE. In one email, Brody boasted about his role, writing Trump's vocal support of Saudi Arabia at this summit, quote, is a direct result of the campaign we have led over the past 2 months to highlight the funding of terrorism by Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood. Brody is suing Qatar. He says they hacked his emails, a charge they deny. But Qatar is facing more scrutiny because of another court case. Prominent Qataris are being sued by rapper Ice Cube. He says they didn't pay him as promised in a business deal, and his partner testified that they tried to use them to get to Steve Bannon, in testimony describing their offer as a bribe, which they also deny. All sides have spent millions of dollars on lobbyists trying to sway the Trump administration.
One country in the Gulf region is a threat to global security: Qatar.
Putting ads on the president's favorite cable channel, placing op-eds in prominent papers, lobbying lawmakers.
We stand with the United States to defeat terrorism in all forms.
There are a lot of guys who are making an awful lot of money in this town.
Former lobbyist Stephen Billett thinks they are likely wasting millions of dollars.
Because you never really see any evidence of it later on. You know, you don't see decisions made at a later time that indicate that there was a positive outcome.
According to the New York Times, the Saudis and UAE offered to help the Trump campaign before the election. It's unclear if anything was done on his behalf with their money, but it's an allegation special counsel Robert Mueller is likely looking at. The man at the center of many of these questions, George Nader, is cooperating with the investigation. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Abdullah, why has the U.S., which has huge leverage in the region, failed to bring all the parties to negotiate a political settlement?
Well, your report just speaks volume about, could answer your question. The domestic angle played a major role in swaying President Trump's opinion to take first sides against Qatar, pointing fingers at Qatar, supporting terrorism big time. And then after the establishment represented by the State Department, by the Pentagon, by the intelligence community, by even the rational approach by the National Security Council and National Security Advisor, he took a more neutral stand. And later on, when President Bush received the Emir of Qatar in April, he showered the Emir of Qatar with praise over the Qatar's role as an ally and as a defender of the United States' interests and as a fighter against terrorism. So all politics is local, as they say in the United States, and clearly with Brody, with Kushner, and with the domestic angle, even related to President Trump's immediate family, it played a major role, and unfortunately intertwined with the United States' strategic interests. And the result is that we have a wishy-washy, flip-flopping United States, lacked leverage, did not practice its leverage, did not play its leadership role to support the Kuwaiti mediation efforts led by the Kuwaiti Emir that everybody supports, at least on lip service. But at the end of the day, you have United States losing in this crisis because its major allies in the region are bickering and fighting, and the United States is just bystanding and watching without doing much to resolve this really critical crisis for United States interests and for regional interests. If you want to stand up to Iran and terrorism, then we have really to make up in the Gulf, the allies in the Gulf to be on the same page.
Okay, Sultan, could this be a sign that the U.S. influence is waning in the region?
I don't think so. I think the U.S. is playing for its own interest. As you know, Trump has been very determined to extract as much wealth from the Gulf and invested in the U.S. as possible. In the last year or so, unemployment has dropped significantly in the United States. Export has increased. Contracts in billions of dollars have been signed. Gulf countries are racing to try and guarantee as many contracts as possible. So I think he's very much playing to his own interest, to his own audience, and the ultimate losers are the Gulf states. And it's not just about creating jobs and opportunities in the US in terms of selling military hardware, but it's also in terms of pursuing his objective vis-a-vis Israel and Jerusalem. This crisis has made or gave the impression that the best way to influence Trump is through Israel. Mm-hmm. And all Arab countries involved have tried to cause up to the Israelis in one way or the other. And of course, the ultimate price that was paid was the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem.
Abdel Aziz, are there still the same hopes that we've seen in the past over the Kuwaiti mediation? Is it going to work? Do you think it has the potential to work against the backdrop of the positions that we've seen, particularly from Saudi Arabia and the UAE?
At least Qatar is showing a sincere, really believe in the Kuwaiti mediation. Has been and it's still supporting this mediation. Will it work or not? This will depend on a lot of external factors. One factor is ready to negotiate, is ready to sit on the table, is ready to put all the concerns on the table, but without pre-conditions, without pre-demands. That is Qatar. The external factors is the blockading countries and others who have interest in this blockade or this crisis to continue. We believe in the Kuwaiti mediation. It has worked before and it has the potential to work, but it's on the table.
Abdullah, there's been an attempt by the US to salvage a deal in April, but then the US administration said it has delayed the meeting. Now there are talks about potential meeting between GCC leaders and Trump in September, right after the United Nations General Assembly gathering. Is it still possible to see Arab leaders, Gulf leaders set aside their differences and talk about a peaceful way out?
Well, for that to come to fruition, I think three things have to happen at play between now and September. Yeah, September is now slated for hopefully the fourth GCC US annual. Now it has become an annual gathering or an annual summit. First one took place in 2015, 2016, 2017, and now 2018. It would be the first since the crisis has erupted. First of all, I think there has to be a rational approach. This crisis has proven that there is no rationality, there is no rational approach, there is no plan B, and it's a zero-sum game that lose-lose for everybody. Nobody is winning except our adversaries and the United States and probably Iran and those hardliners who would like to see us fragmented. So maybe we could work things out around the 13 demands and the 6 principles. If we just mix them together and we talk about fighting terrorism, we talk about stopping the lifeblood of supporting and financing terrorism, adhering to the non-intervention and the safeguarding of sovereignty, supporting the Kuwaiti mediation, number 2. And the United States has to get off its back and to start playing some kind of leverage. I understand that the GCC crisis is not a priority considering the turmoil and the scandals that President Trump finds himself in with the Russian probe, and with today he's talking about he could pardon himself with the Korean issue, with the Russian intervention. So the GCC crisis is not up there in the radars.
Okay.
But still, for the United States and its allies, the United States has really to play a major leverage role supporting the Kuwaiti initiative and mediation, and for the GCC countries really to come to their senses and to sit down and really iron things out, because this is the longer it drags on, everybody is losing, nobody's winning.
Sultan, you know that there are many political analysts who are really pessimistic about any possible way out of this crisis. in the near future. My question is, what's next if all the parties remain entrenched on their positions?
I think let's take for Qatar to start with. Qatar, I think, has two options. One option is to continue as it is now, trying to build its own resilience and to rely less and less on its neighbors and to build greater alliances internationally. And the other option, I think, and this is something that is at the core of the wealth of Qatar, is that they really need to start to think strategically in terms of their gas market. Two major contracts are soon due for renewal with Korea and Japan, and between them they provide maybe 40% of the income of Qatar, and those has got to be the priority. I think it is time for Qatar to stop worrying about the issue in terms of crisis management mood and start to work long term. It is very important that they secure contracts with their customers, particularly I think South Korea and Japan, and really start thinking differently. One way of doing so is to maybe revive the idea of liquid gas or gas cartel that was discussed in the past, maybe with the Russians, the Algerians, the Iranians and others, so that their livelihood is protected. If they continue to be worried about what the United States will think and what the United States will do, given the very careless, I think, foreign policy so far from Trump, they are only likely to lose. So they've already tried. It's been a year. If I were to say 6 months ago, we would have said, yes, maybe there's a hope, it can be resolved, they can reconcile. But for this kind of blockade to continue for a whole year and no signs of it coming to an end is really very, very dangerous.
And this has to take us to the idea of what's next for Qatar in particular and for the region. With the Arab League should have played a role, it didn't. The GCC should have stepped in, it didn't. Abdel Aziz, do the Qataris trust the regional institutions?
You know, actually, Qatar, I agree with Sultan here. Qatar has already departed the crisis management mood. Now it's thinking of the future. Now they know the capacity of the Arab League. They know the capacity of the Islamic League. They know the capacity of the Gulf Cooperation and the limitations of all these organizations. Qatar is now redefining its alliances, redefining its geography, it's redefining its geopolitics, it's redefining everything, even economic, its economy future. So it's really an exercise, a comprehensive exercise of redefining everything around its sovereignty and independency.
Abdullah, in less than a minute, please, the political order that has prevailed in the GCC countries before the crisis, is it still viable? Can it still prevail in the future?
It's very tough, really. It's a very tough call. The GCC now is a life support system. But one thing for sure, I think the lack of, we need confidence building measures. One thing for sure is that things are not going to go back to the way they were before June 5th. Even I expect in a few years from now, as I stated in my just published book on the GCC crisis, root causes, and the future of GCC alliance, we could see different players, regional and international players, playing a major role when United States abdicate this region and not play its role as a leader of the free world as they claim. Then we're going to expect to see a different landscape in the next couple of years, or even maybe a few years from now. Major players are going to come to this region, and we're going to see different landscape in the GCC and in the Gulf as a whole.
Abdullah Shayji, Abdel Aziz Al-Horr, Sultan Barakat, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you for having you on the program. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com for further discussion. Go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem, Ahelbarra, and the whole team here. Bye for now.